Hello, everybody. This is Frank with Iron Age News. It is Tuesday, February 3rd, 9 a.m., and here we are, South Florida Conservative News Service Center, and it is freezing us to death. Iguanas are dropping from the trees at a staggering rate, which causes car accidents. It does indeed. But we're going to talk about something very important and funny that nobody talks about it in the news even though they state it quite correctly, which is the president's issue with getting his pick over to the Federal Reserve as the reserve chair head. And we're going to talk about what he wants to do financially and how it links the Federal Reserve, the Treasury, and American economic. I can't, what would be the word? A boom in the economy, in production, and a massive employment. And it all hinges around getting the Fed to start to do things on the behalf of the American public instead of on the behalf of BlackRock and JP Morgan Chase and people like that. Why we say this now, and it'll probably come up later on as I'm talking. There was a couple of articles now that they're discussing the senators that are blocking Washner's, however you say his name's, uh, uh, nomination. One is Tillis, also a shitbag, and Pocahontas, Elizabeth Warren, both of which have said they would let it go. They would let him go if the president would cancel pretty much the investigation into the current uh, Fed chair. Just make it go away. Doesn't say positive or negative. It just says make it go away. So I would say if you have two senators that are holding up a governmental procedure because they want a criminal investigation, probably it's going to turn into go away, that's got to be illegal, don't you think? But it's not illegal in Washington. And when you see Warren, who is a total shill for the left, and Tillis, who is a total shill for the right, getting together in this group harmony thing to pound away at Trump's nomination, you know there's big money behind it. That big money, of course, would be the organizations, we'll say organizations that benefit from the Fed doing what it has done for decades, which every time the United States starts to get on its feet again, the Federal Reserve comes along and knocks it back down. We'll explain how that works at some point. And it's actually going to be, it should actually be a few videos because financial stuff takes a while to read in. We have broke down into, I think, three different articles at www.southfloridaconservative.com. Also at Substack, same title. And that would give it to you all instead of having to hear my lovely voice here in the frigid air. Okay. And so let's get to this here. Why Trump wants the Fed to work with Treasury and why the system, and by the system, we mean the swamp, is fighting back. Hate to use that term, but that's the only thing that really sticks when you're talking about a monoparty or a uniparty. So for years, okay, Americans have been told the Federal Reserve is independent, neutral, and above politics. Let's put a disclaimer in here. We are not the end the Fed people. We are not conspiracy theorists. I'm sure that when I'm talking to my BitChute audience here, the Jews did not run the whole thing. Let's get that out of the way and move on to other things. All right. But the Federal Reserve as independent, neutral, and above politics, okay. But former and president, former and present President Donald Trump has been blunt about his disagreement with how the independence has actually functioned. And you got to realize Trump's background in big money is through actually developing real estate, developing things. Things have to occur, things you can hold in your hand. High finance, there's nothing to hold in your hand because high finance doesn't create anything. It doesn't. Not the way it's done now. So his argument, Trump's, is simple. When the Fed operates in isolation, which it does, responding more to financial markets than to the productive economy, money stops working and starts sitting. And that, Trump argues, is one of the reasons economic recovery has been so uneven and so fragile. Now, today, we're going to be unpacking why Trump wants the Federal Reserve to work with the Treasury, not against it, and why that view has triggered fierce resistance from Wall Street, institutional Washington, and the paid and bought off members of the Republican Party, as well as we don't even have to tell you about the Democrats, right? So, like I said, Trump's economic worldview is unusually concrete for a president. He does not treat money as an abstract policy variable, he treats it as fuel. You look at what Trump is talking about. I don't know why everybody has such a problem with him. He tells you in his meetings what he wants to do. So he says money should be building factories and hiring workers and developing energy and making America great again and circulating through the economy so that we don't need all this welfare shit because you could go have a job and make 5 times what you could make on welfare and feel good about yourself. That's what he is saying. He is the guy who watched the World War II movies of the gigantic industry that occurred late 30s into the 40s into the 50s, right? When interest rates are high and volatility is constantly suppressed by central bank intervention, capital rationally chooses the easiest return. I would call them lazy, but you call it what you want. Short-term yield, balance sheet games, buybacks, or they just simply sit in the cash. They know they're going to get a certain percentage. Basically, if I know if I'm JP Morgan Chase and I'm going to get 4% doing nothing, parking my money somewhere, I'm going to get 4%. And I say, JP Morgan Chase, I want you to build or allow money to not go into your coffers, but into these other companies that are going to build factories and hire people and everything. And you invest in that, and maybe you'll get 5%, maybe 6. They're not going to take it. They're going to take the 4 because they don't have to do any work for it. Trust me. If it was 10 to 15 to 20, you get them moving. You're not going to get them moving for that 1 percentile because there's always what they would consider risk. I have an unrisky investment by sitting here on a big pile of money like a fat dragon, or I can help people and maybe not make that money back. All right. So that's one view of it. And like I said, these are the games that are being played there when interest rates are high and the volatility is constantly suppressed by central banks. Now, Trump has repeatedly complained that when these markets move up or down naturally, the Fed has stepped in and kills the move. Okay. In his view, his caretaker approach protects large financial institutions while starving real investment. And I would say there's a very good argument for that. And, the truth of the matter, right? The Fed's actual power versus its intended role is also brought into question under this administration. Officially, the Federal Reserve is independent to protect price stability and employment. But in practice, especially since 2008, the Fed has become a permanent presence in the markets. It's actively managed the bond yields. I know that myself. Supported asset prices through quantitative easing and has created expectations of intervention whenever volatility appears. This matters to all of us because the biggest beneficiaries of this system, the system that we're talking about, especially since 2008, are large asset managers and systemically important banks. Institutions that can borrow cheaply, arbitrage policy signals, and they profit from stability itself. Okay? Such as BlackRock, such as JP Morgan Chase. These firms don't need factories to be built. They benefit when money is abundant, predictable, and centrally managed. That's their business model at this point. Okay. Trump's critique is not that these firms are evil, that's everybody else's critique, but that policies have been optimized around them, which is true, argue against it, not around workers, builders, or small businesses. That's how it is. In Trump's mind and in the minds of many people, myself included, the United States is in a war. We are in a war. We have been in a war for a number of years. We were losing pretty steadily. We're rallying right now, but that can go either way. The reason that he had when he came in with this Make America Great Again, not that part, but the second part, Build Back America, the reason nothing was just jumping out was because of the Fed's activities. The day he got in and he had 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 shovel-ready projects for us to do in America. And also the idea that we needed various industries to flourish because we were tired of being based on the Chinese. The industries in the United States are not patriotic. They are the opposite of patriotic. They will tell you they are risk adverse, but the industries in the United States, for the most part, these gigantic corporations are just like having a cancer on the body. They're here. Can I cut it off or can I cut it off? All right. It's not doing anything to help the United States as a whole, regardless of what anybody tells you. All right. So anyway, that's been said. Okay. So that's like I said, Trump doesn't believe that they're evil, but they're not doing anything great. There's evil and then there's corporate evil, right? So I guess you have to look at it that way. One is dispassionate theoretically when you go to court, and the other one isn't. You figure out which one's which. So traditionally, the United States Department of Treasury handles fiscal policy, the taxes, the spending, debt issuance, and the Fed handles monetary policy. Now, Trump argues that this separation has become dysfunctional. And the reasoning, we'll bullet point it because it's easier for everybody. Treasury tries to stimulate growth through tax and spending policies. The Fed simultaneously tightens financial conditions. The result is higher borrowing costs cancel out fiscal initiatives. So, from Trump's standpoint, this isn't independence, it's cross purposes. And that's why he's leaned on guys like Scott Bessent, who views Treasury as a capital allocation architect, not just as a bookkeeper. He is the wartime consigliere that Donald Trump needed over at Treasury, let me tell you. And in this framework, Treasury sets incentives for productive investment. The Feds avoid actively suppressing growth through excessive tightening, and markets regain price discovery instead of waiting for central bank signals. So you would actually see true movement in the stock markets. Wouldn't that be scary, right? So this brings us to Trump's pick for the Fed chair, Kevin Warsh. It's killing me on that one. Warsh is not a radical. He is a former Fed governor who criticized the excessive quantitative easing. He was warning people about balance sheet expansion, and he emphasized credibility and discipline. Ironically, that made him dangerous to the status quo. He was a dangerous man because he wanted things to go the right way. Why? Because Warsh represents a Fed less focused on constant market support, a Fed more willing to step back, a Fed that might allow capital to reprice risk. And that alarms Wall Street. Wall Street institutions have become accustomed to intervention. Remember the bank bailouts, stock market crashes, shit like that. So you can just play with money all you want. The federal government will step in and bail you out. None of those events that we're talking about were based around doing anything solidly productive in the United States. Everything was just paper moving. You know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, nobody painted a picture or built a house or bought a car or sent their children to a school. None of that happened. 15, 20 guys made a fortune. Everybody else took it in the neck. And that's not how the American financial system was set up to behave. So what also, like I said, the Wall Street institutions used to the bailouts and everything else. Senators, which is where Tillis and Warren come in, invested in defending Fed independence as an absolute, and political actors who fear any appearance of executive influence. So, opposition to Warsh isn't just partisan, it's institutional. It is uniparty. It is not just the Democrats, which takes us back to the story of Tillis and Warren and get rid of the investigation against the current head of the Fed, and maybe we'll let you have your guy. But if you let him have the guy, then we've lost the leverage of what is going to go with this investigation. And Tillis, I believe, was quoted as saying, "Well, then we'll just wait till the investigation's over." Well, he can do that because he just got elected, so he's got X amount of years. But I'll tell you what, if there's something in there that they can catch him on, he better watch his ass because he is showing obstructionist all the way along the line. If this was a mafia trial, he would already be brought in for questioning. No doubt in my mind. Okay. So the Trump supporters are countering that the Fed has already been politicized. We just discussed that, just quietly in favor of financial incumbents. This tension is explaining why Warsh's confirmation is going to be rough. Unless somebody gets to somebody with pictures of something else, or the famous uh, horse head in the bed scene, we're going to have a fight over this, just as they are having a fight in the Congress because socialism and the people involved in this, which are also touched by it, think that they have the man on the rocks, which they do not. The average citizen is seeing the level of corruption that is out there. They're watching some of them have lost their life savings in stock market bullshit, you know, with no recourse. And in the meantime, Jamie Dimon's made $1 billion, right? And is he really a smart guy? I think he's probably a nice guy to have at the country club. I wouldn't want him to get rid of a dead hooker with me, but maybe he has, right? So the markets are reacting nervously to even this mild suggestion of this coordination because there are anticipated, regardless of what anyone tells you about the quantitatives working in the market, it's always better to know what's going to go on before it goes on. And with the Fed the way it was an incredibly predictive system. And this fight is not about this guy Warsh because he is not coming in there to cure cancer. It's about who gets the money and who the monetary policy ultimately serves. So, at its core, this debate asks a simple but uncomfortable question. Should America's money primarily protect the markets or should it build the country? Trump's answer is clear that the money has to go to work. Whether the system will allow him to realign the Fed and Treasury toward the goal remains open and politically explosive as a question. So that's where we are with that. And if you go and see these articles, like I said, with Tillis and Warren and a couple of the other, they're going to get that asshole woman from Alaska to vote with them if she have to. They're saying we're saving the grand institution of the Fed. Bullshit. You're killing a criminal investigation pretty much into a guy who has probably helped you all become, excuse me, millionaires. That wasn't my whatever it was. It wasn't a disease that just caught me. Sorry, a little frustrated there. These people have cost the United States since we'll just say 2006. So it's at 20 years. In the last 2 decades, billions, if not trillions of dollars in value have been lost in the United States because of these people and because they have kept the Fed operating the way it has. In the same time, that value has gone into the coffers of the Black Rocks and the JP Morgan Chases and other groups, which, if you look at the price of their stocks, JP Morgan Chase, I think, is, Christ, it's not cheap. I thought I'd written it down here just to show it to somebody. 351.42 yesterday when we did the script for this. That was versus ExxonMobil, which you think is a big company. ExxonMobil was 141.40. So more than double to 80, almost triple the value. JP Morgan Chase's stock was almost triple the value of ExxonMobil. And how did it get there? By manipulating, or not, they didn't manipulate it, but by catching the manipulation of this system and just going with it, right? Now, Senator Tillis and Senator Warren and whatever her name is, the CHAG, they ought to be the ones being investigated. They have probably all taken money from either these very, very big companies where they've been offered jobs or their sister has been offered a job. Something has gone on because people would say, well, we can't do anything with the Fed. This is why there are those groups that say to get rid of the Fed entirely. That is going to be something that we cannot do while we are fighting an insurrection, actually a counter, no, I'm sorry, an insurrection. The Trump people are the counter insurgency. The We got to make sure I'm doing it right. Okay? Sorry. One more time. Democratic coup. Trump shows up, which is an insurgency. Democrats are running a counterinsurgency. So so Trump is running an insurgency against an entrenched and corrupt system to try to get it to operate in a manner in which it was originally designed to operate. Which, as you said, if you saw the way America jumped into production during World War II, that's what should have happened here when he said we're going to build America again. And when people say we got to keep our welfare, or we got to keep our free house, we got to keep our free this, it's because they are not going to be given, or they either can't be given jobs because they can't maintain them at any level, or they don't want to go to work and it's easier to sell yourself into slavery for $550 a month, or nobody's explained to you that you won't need welfare as a young person because the jobs that will be available won't be working at a Kentucky Fried Chicken stand. These will be better jobs. And that means that you can't have illegal aliens doing all your slave labor because that has to be worked out too. That's one of the ways that most inner city people are deprived their jobs because I can go hire illegals, right? Hey, Florida still does it. It's not the agricultural side, it's the construction side. Agriculture in Florida, if you talk to anybody who's involved in it, and luckily I had a chance to interview Rick Roth, who's running for state senate, and he will explain the hoops that an agricultural person has to go through bringing labor into the country. It's ridiculous. The costs are ridiculous. The whole thing is stupid. But if I'm building houses down the street here, Toll Brothers, or anybody like that, I can just get any Tom, Dick, and Harry off the street. Nobody checks anything. When they started to hit places like up at University of Florida, I think it was, that set the tone and everybody got afraid for a while. But then they got unafraid. And I put that down to the governor's office not doing what it should have done, and our current attorney general, who was still in office at the time, who should have cracked right down. But that's just a personal aside here in Florida. Let's keep on the big subject, which is let's get the Fed under control. Let's get these big jobs out there for everybody. Those of you who have children, let's make it where they can actually afford their own house and buy a car or two. Maybe their wife or husband can stay home and watch those kids so they don't turn out to be animals like the ones in Milwaukee, right? So that's all I have for you now. Like and subscribe. I have to start saying it more. Like and subscribe if you have any questions, if you have any particular topics you'd like us to look at. We are more than happy to look at them. Constantly, if you notice, we sort of go through whatever, we go very strong in one direction for a while because that's where the news is. And that's what the people are interested in more. So you got to go with that. But we want to still be able to cover all the other things that we find important, like this issue. So that's all. Have a good day. And I hope you all survived Groundhog Day yesterday. See you later.